There is this very specific, very quiet kind of exhaustion that I think a lot of people carry around with them.
Oh, absolutely. It's so common.
Yeah, and it's not, the exhaustion of a long day at work or like staying up too late. It's not physical exertion at all.
I did something entirely different.
Exactly. It is this subtle, just lingering, almost invisible drain on your energy. And it happens when you are constantly made to feel like you are just, not quite enough, especially around one specific person.
Yes, that hyper-specific drain.
Right. Like you leave a conversation with them and you can't quite put your finger on what went wrong, but your stomach is in knots, your heart rate is elevated.
You're second-guessing literally everything you just said.
Totally. You feel entirely off balance, like the ground beneath you just tilted a few degrees. And, well, that exhaustion is the invisible aftermath of narcissistic abuse. And today, we are dismantling it.
We really are. It's so necessary.
We are diving deep into the source material today. Specifically, we're using Kirsten Alexander's 2025 framework from her incredible book, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, a practical guide.
Such a powerful resource.
It really is.
Yeah.
We want to move past all those social media buzzwords, look at the hard biology of trauma, and honestly, literally rewire your nervous system. Okay, let's unpack this.
I love that.
Because we are not just defining the mechanics of manipulation today,
Yeah.
We are actively extracting the actionable tools you need to regain your sense of self-worth and really your feeling of fundamental safety.
And I think shifting the focus away from diagnosing the person causing the harm and turning the lens entirely onto the internal experience of the survivor it's the necessary first step.
Yeah, because we get so caught up in them, right?
Exactly. The goal here isn't to sit back and play armchair psychologist to the difficult people in your life. The objective is to understand the physiological and psychological residue that they leave behind in your system.
The residue, yeah, that's a great word for it.
Right, because the focus has to shift from, what is wrong with their brain to why do my hands shake? Or why do I feel so unsafe?
Why do I doubt my own memory?
Yes. Why do I doubt my own reality when I am in their orbit? Understanding the mechanics of your own distress it's what actually provides the blueprint for getting out of it.
I mean, that is so validating right off the bat. And to understand how to reverse engineer that distress, we have to look at the specific nature of this trauma.
For sure.
The word that surfaces repeatedly when analyzing Kirsten's framework is insidious.
Insidious. Yeah, that really captures it.
It is crafty, it's sneaky, and it's devious by design. I mean, think about a physical injury, like a broken leg.
Yeah.
That offers a socially recognized trajectory of pain and healing.
Right. People can see a cast.
Exactly. You get a cast, you get a clear diagnosis, people hold doors open for you. There is a visible metric of recovery. But mental and emotional abuse, it operates entirely in the dark.
Completely invisible to the outside world.
And deeply disorienting to the person experiencing it, because the injury isn't like a single catastrophic blow. It is a slow, methodical erosion of your reality.
And what's fascinating here is that erosion often begins long before the survivor even realizes they are in danger.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
It is, and that's why the concept of being primed is so critical to understand. If we look at the source material, Kirsten's own history provides a really stark look at how this baseline is established.
Yeah, her childhood story was wild.
Right. She didn't simply happen to marry someone with a covert narcissistic structure. Her entire developmental framework was built by a father who exhibited profound, classic narcissistic traits.
And when you look at the details of that environment, you really start to see how a child's nervous system just adapts to absurdity.
Oh, absolutely. Like, for example, her father would claim to have 5 university degrees.
5, which is just, absurd.
Completely. And a number that would inexplicably inflate depending on the audience he was trying to impress. He would trap her in these hours-long lectures, literally forcing her to listen to historical facts that were demonstrably, objectively incorrect.
The psychological weight of that on a developing brain is just staggering.
It's immense.
You are a child,
Yeah.
right? You're looking at a textbook that says one thing, and then you have a primary caregiver who demands you accept an alternate reality simply because his ego requires him to be the ultimate authority.
Right. It trains the child that truth is irrelevant.
Yes. The only thing that matters is appeasing the emotional volatility of the authority figure. And that demand for absolute control over reality, I mean, it reached a level of pure chaos with that commune incident.
Oh my goodness, the commune incident.
I was reading that and my jaw dropped. The father secures a job in Sudan, right? And instead of managing the family's transition with any semblance of stability,
Like a normal parent would.
exactly, he ships the younger brother off to Australia, leaves the mother to pack, and just abandons his daughters and their family home, which he had arbitrarily decided to convert into a commune.
Just unbelievable.
There was a literal stranger living in the teenager's bedroom. He detonated his family's safety and structure because he wanted to do something he deemed interesting and extraordinary.
Completely blind to the collateral damage.
Exactly. Completely blind to the catastrophic damage he was causing his kids.
Yeah, when a developing brain is subjected to that level of chronic instability, where your physical and emotional space is constantly violated to serve someone else's grand narrative, your nervous system adopts chaos as its baseline.
Chaos becomes normal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You learn that love, or at least family attachment, requires you to shrink. You have to abandon your needs, and you have to manage the erratic moods of the person in power.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. That is what priming is. You are biochemically and psychologically conditioned to accept the unacceptable.
So when she later married an individual exhibiting covert narcissistic behaviors, like the manipulation, the control, the erratic emotional shifts,
The alarm bells didn't ring.
they didn't because it felt familiar.
Right. She spent years rationalizing his behavior as bipolar disorder. The unacceptable didn't register as a threat because it felt indistinguishable from home.
It's like carbon monoxide poisoning.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Right. When you are in a house with a carbon monoxide leak, you don't realize you are being poisoned. There's no smell. There's no visible smoke. Your body just slowly starts to shut down.
You feel fatigued, confused.
Exactly. Disoriented. You might blame it on not sleeping well or maybe stress at work. By the time you actually realize the environment itself is suffocating you, the poisoning is so advanced that your cognitive functions are just impaired.
You can barely find the door.
You can barely coordinate your limbs to find the door. The disorientation prevents you from escaping the very thing that is killing you.
Wait, is this why victims so often defend their abusers? Because the reality of the situation is just too disorienting to accept all at once.
Yes, exactly. The brain normalizes that poison by creating what we know as cognitive dissonance.
Which is just brutal. It's the agonizing mental friction that occurs when you are forced to hold two completely contradictory beliefs simultaneously.
like, they love me, but also they are destroying me.
Precisely. This person is my partner, my protector, they love me, conflicting directly with, this person is systematically dismantling my sanity and actively harming me. The human brain cannot tolerate that level of dissonance for long without breaking down.
So it has to pick a side.
It has to resolve the tension. So the brain often defaults to defending the abuser. It manufactures excuses because accepting the raw truth that the person you have built your life around is a predator is a reality too shattering to process all at once.
And the manipulation is often wrapped in these gestures that weaponize this exact dissonance, right?
Oh, completely.
Like taking the example of the gifts from the book, the ex-husband would routinely purchase these incredibly extravagant items that she neither wanted nor needed.
The expensive car, the watch.
Yeah, a high-end watch that didn't even fit her lifestyle. The explicit outward narrative he presented was, I am buying you this because you are worth it.
Which sounds so lovely on the surface.
It does. But wrapping that control in a gift box, it just scrambles the victim's reality. I mean, you can't get angry at someone who just bought you a car without feeling like an ungrateful monster.
Right. Yet the implicit message operating beneath the surface is really a dual-pronged attack.
Okay, unpack that. How is a gift an attack?
Well, the hidden subtext of those grand gestures is designed to erode autonomy. The first message is a subtle invalidation. It's saying, the things you choose for yourself, your current possessions, your taste, they are inadequate.
Oh, wow. Let me overwrite your identity with my superior choices.
Exactly. And the second message is entirely self-serving. It's, look at the magnitude of my generosity. Look at what a flawless, magnanimous provider I am.
So it's not even about her.
Not at all. The gift is not about bringing joy to the recipient. It is a prop used to construct the abuser's false self. It functions as a leash.
A leash. That is so sinister.
It is, because when the victim inevitably feels anxious, trapped, or resentful, instead of grateful, they turn that criticism inward. They think, what is wrong with me that I am not happy?
Oh, man.
The abuser has successfully outsourced their own toxicity, making the victim hold all the emotional baggage of the interaction.
And managing that constant underlying toxicity, it just drives the nervous system to the brink of collapse. I mean, the anecdote about the Airbnb retreat perfectly captures the sheer visceral terror this dynamic produces.
That story is just heartbreaking.
It really is. Here is a woman who has finally sought out physical distance to process a divorce. She's at a retreat, supposedly out of cell service, specifically to escape his relentless, boundary-crushing daily check-ins.
Right, she just needed space to think.
But the conditioning to manage his fragile reality is so deeply entrenched that the thought of ignoring his demand for a goodnight text feels like a literal life or death scenario.
The panic takes over.
Right. She retreats to an Airbnb, climbs physically inside a cupboard, boots up a YouTube video of a bubbling stream on her laptop to simulate the ambient noise of a nature retreat.
Just the lengths she had to go to.
All just so she can record a voice note telling him she wants a divorce without triggering an inquisition about her actual whereabouts.
And the absurdity of the scenario really peaks when the cleaning staff opens that cupboard to retrieve a vacuum cleaner and she practically tumbles out onto the floor.
I mean, you almost want to laugh at the image, but...
Right, but the humor instantly dissolves when you examine the profound psychological subjugation it represents. A grown adult, highly intelligent and capable, is reduced to hiding in a closet playing fake river sounds.
Because the fear of her partner's psychological retaliation just completely overrides her basic logic and dignity.
Yes, this is the hallmark of traumatic bonding. The victim bends their life, their environment, and their own integrity into absolute pretzels to avoid detonating the emotional landmines the abuser has laid everywhere.
If you are listening to this right now and you find yourself constantly pre-paving conversations in your head,
Oh, the mental rehearsal.
right, anticipating every possible way a normal interaction could be twisted into a conflict, if you're altering your behavior to mitigate a rage that hasn't even happened yet, you are living in that cupboard.
You really are.
You are constantly generating these elaborate justifications for behavior that, if an outsider described it to you, you would immediately identify as toxic. And there is a distinction highlighted in the framework that cuts right through that fog.
The difference between a reason and an excuse.
Yes. A reason for bad behavior is not an excuse for it.
That distinction is the scalpel that severs the trauma bond.
I love that. The scalpel.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because empathetic people naturally seek context. When someone behaves appallingly, the empathetic brain looks for the why.
They had a bad childhood or they're stressed at work.
Exactly. They have an undiagnosed mood disorder. These are reasons. They explain the mechanics of the dysfunction. However, understanding the origin of a destructive behavior does not obligate you to act as its shock absorber.
Wow, that's powerful.
A reason provides context. An excuse demands absolution. You can maintain profound, deep compassion for the brokenness of another human being from a safe distance without allowing them to systematically destroy your psychological architecture.
Okay, having established the invisible, suffocating environment these dynamics create, we have to transition to the actual mechanics of the manipulation.
The actual playbook.
Right. How is this control maintained day after day? Because it is highly systematic, the behavior is not random, it follows a deeply predictable cadence.
It's terrifyingly predictable.
Right. When we look at the behavioral mechanics, we move beyond the personal anecdotes and into the universal playbook that narcissists deploy. And that begins with the highly documented cycle of idealization, devaluation, and discard.
So the cycle relies heavily on manipulating the brain's reward circuitry, specifically the dopamine pathways. It begins with idealization, which is commonly referred to as love bombing.
And it's so important to distinguish this from just the natural infatuation of a new relationship, right?
Crucial. Normal infatuation is a mutual, gradual discovery process. Love bombing is a highly calibrated, overwhelming flood of validation, mirroring, and grandiosity.
It's like too much, too fast.
Exactly. The abuser studies the target, identifies their deepest insecurities and unmet needs, and essentially morphs into the exact puzzle piece required to fill that void.
They become exactly what you want them to be.
They reflect your desires back to you, convincing you that you are the center of their universe, that they have never felt a connection like this before. It is an intense, intoxicating psychological high designed to bypass your critical thinking and forge a rapid, intense dependency.
But the architecture of that phase is entirely hollow. It is a performance, right? It's a mask they're wearing to secure the attachment.
Yes, and masks are heavy.
Exactly. Because holding that mask requires an immense amount of energy, and eventually the mask slips. The target begins to assert their own humanity, like they have a bad day, they disagree with an opinion, they show a
They
flaw.
become a real person.
Right, and that shatters the abuser's illusion of a perfect mirror, and that is when the descent into the devaluation phase begins.
And the transition into devaluation is often subtle at first, which is what makes it incredibly disorienting.
You don't even know what's happening.
Right. The very traits the abuser praised during the idealization phase are suddenly weaponized.
Oh, like if they loved your independence, now you are selfish.
Precisely. If they loved your empathy, you are now overly sensitive and dramatic. The validation is abruptly withdrawn and replaced with chronic criticism, passive aggression, and emotional withholding.
It's emotional whiplash.
It is. But the true trap of the devaluation phase is intermittent reinforcement. They do not turn off the affection completely, they dispense it in unpredictable microscopic crumbs.
Which is the slot machine mechanic, isn't it?
Exactly right.
Because if a slot machine never paid out, you would just stop pulling the lever.
And walk away.
Right. And if it paid out every time, it would be boring. But because you never know when the payout is coming, your brain becomes completely obsessed with the pursuit.
You're hooked on the hope.
The victim ends up exhausting themselves, constantly trying to decode what combination of perfect behavior will bring back the person they met during the love bombing phase.
And they don't realize that person never actually existed.
It never existed. And when the victim is finally exhausted, or when they start to set boundaries and demand respect, the cycle culminates in the discard.
Yes.
The abuser abruptly severs the connection, often with just cruel indifference, because the victim is no longer a viable source of unquestioning validation, which is what we call narcissistic supply.
And during this entire cycle, the abuser utilizes a specific conversational tactic to maintain dominance, which is real-time narrative shifting.
Oh, the gaslighting on steroids.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a form of psychological martial arts where they instantly deflect any accountability.
Can you give an example of how that looks in real life?
Well, if you approach them with a raw, vulnerable truth, right? Like saying, when you spoke to me that way in front of our friends, I felt deeply humiliated and hurt.
A normal request for empathy.
Exactly. A healthy partner would pause, experience effective empathy, and address the pain they caused.
They'd say, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Right. The narcissist, however, perceives the accusation not as a request for connection, but as an existential attack on their false self. So in a fraction of a second, they will twist the narrative.
They flip it.
Completely. They will focus on the tone of your voice, accuse you of attacking them, and reframe your expression of pain as evidence of your inherent instability. You initiate the conversation seeking an apology for their cruelty, and you walk away apologizing for your tone or for being unreasonable.
It makes you feel like you're losing your mind. And that cheese board anecdote from the book perfectly isolates this dynamic.
Oh, that story's a classic example.
Right. The ex-husband invites a sister-in-law over, someone neither of them particularly likes, by the way, purely because his ego demands he impress her.
He needed an audience.
Exactly. The wife, operating under her conditioned role, curates this elegant, beautiful spread of food. She manages the hospitality, she puts in all the labor, and the guest leaves thoroughly impressed.
She did all the work.
All of it. And a normal response from a partner would be gratitude for her effort, like, thanks for doing that. Instead, he looks at her and says, this is why I love you, because you make me look good.
It's chilling.
It completely cannibalizes her effort, her skill, and her existence. It absorbs it entirely into his own ego. She is not a separate human being with skills to him. She is an appliance functioning to reflect his grandiosity to the world.
And to truly grasp the rigidity of this behavior, you have to examine the psychological core of the narcissistic structure.
Right, like what is actually under the hood?
Underneath the arrogance, the grandiosity, and the relentless need for control is a profound, terrifying psychological void.
A void?
Yes. At their core, the narcissist harbors an unbearable, deeply buried narrative of worthlessness and toxic shame.
Really? So it's not actually that they think they're better than everyone?
Not deep down, no. To survive this internal landscape, they construct an impenetrable false self. It's a facade of perfection, superiority, and invulnerability.
Okay.
But this false self is incredibly fragile. It requires constant external validation to remain intact. Therefore, admitting fault, taking accountability, or acknowledging that they have harmed someone, it threatens to shatter the false self and expose that unbearable void beneath.
So they literally can't admit they're wrong.
Their reality bending, the gaslighting, the blame shifting, they're not mere communication errors. They are primitive psychological survival mechanisms. They must annihilate your reality to protect your own.
Wow. Which brings up a critical point that runs counter to almost all conventional relationship advice.
This is where things get really tricky.
Yeah, because we are constantly taught that communication is the universal solvent, right? If there is friction, you sit down, you use "I feel" statements, you practice active listening, and you build a bridge of mutual understanding.
That's the standard advice.
But wait, if they rely on twisting reality, does that mean sitting them down to communicate your feelings like you would in a healthy relationship is actually a trap?
It is absolutely a trap. It is the hardest illusion for an empathetic person to surrender. The belief that if I just explain my pain clearly enough, if I just use the right words, they will finally understand and they will change.
Because we want to believe everyone has empathy.
Right. This assumes the abuser possesses effective empathy, the neurological ability to vicariously experience the emotional state of another person.
But they don't.
They do not. They may possess cognitive empathy, meaning they can intellectually identify that you are crying and understand what words are required to mimic, comfort, or to manipulate the situation, but they do not feel your distress.
That is so hard to wrap your head around.
It is. When you sit down and bare your soul, detailing exactly how their actions dismantle your self-esteem, you are not fostering intimacy.
What are you doing then?
You are handing them a highly detailed topographic map of your emotional vulnerabilities. You are showing them exactly where the levers are, and they will file that information away to exploit during the next cycle of devaluation.
Oh, wow. So you are just giving them ammunition.
Exactly.
You have to let go of the fantasy that your agony will be the catalyst for their epiphany. The profound, tragic reality outlined in this framework is that they already know they are hurting you.
Yes, they know.
They possess the cognitive awareness of the damage they are inflicting. They simply do not care because your pain is secondary to their need for control and validation. They care about how your reaction affects their environment and their self-image, not about the internal suffering you are enduring.
Letting go of that fantasy is a form of deep psychological mourning. You are mourning the realization that the bridge you have been desperately trying to build is attached to nothing on the other side.
It's just a bridge to nowhere.
Exactly. But surrendering that illusion is the absolute prerequisite for reclaiming your own agency. You stop pouring your vital life force into a black hole.
And while the psychological mind games are just devastating, we have to look at what this environment is physically doing to the body.
A physical toll is massive.
Right. Victims of chronic emotional abuse don't just feel confused. They present with severe physiological symptoms: chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, gastrointestinal distress, terrifying hypervigilance.
The body keeps the score.
Exactly. The trauma isn't a ghost haunting your thoughts. It is a measurable biological state. Living in this constant atmosphere of unpredictable psychological violence turns your body into a storm shelter.
We have to look at the brain mechanics, specifically how the nervous system adapts to a war zone.
So the human nervous system is an evolutionary masterpiece designed primarily to keep you alive.
Right, survival first. When you are exposed to chronic, unpredictable threat, which is exactly what a relationship with a narcissist is, your autonomic nervous system shifts out of its baseline state of social engagement and rest and locks in to the sympathetic nervous system's fight-or-flight response.
You're just stuck in overdrive.
You are marinating in a constant cocktail of stress hormones. Let's break down the specific neurological architecture of this trauma response, starting with the amygdala.
Okay, the amygdala. That is essentially the brain's smoke detector, right? Its entire job is to scan the environment for threats and sound the alarm if it detects danger, long before the conscious brain even realizes what is happening.
Exactly. And under the conditions of chronic abuse, the amygdala becomes profoundly hypersensitized. It loses its ability to distinguish between a life-threatening predator and a minor interpersonal friction.
Gets stuck in the on position.
It does. This is why a survivor will experience a massive physiological panic response, racing heart, sweating, shallow breathing, just because their partner sighed heavily.
Or closed a cabinet door slightly too hard.
Right. Or paused for too long before answering a text. The amygdala perceives those microshifts in the environment as precursors to an emotional attack, and it floods the body with adrenaline to prepare for impact.
And as the amygdala is sounding the alarm, the hippocampus, which acts as the brain's memory filing system, starts to malfunction under the weight of the trauma.
Yes, the filing system crashes.
Right. In a regulated brain, the hippocampus takes an experience, processes it, and stamps it with a time and date before storing it. It tells the brain, this terrible thing happened, but it happened in the past. It is over.
But when the brain is flooded with extreme levels of cortisol from a traumatic event, that time-stamping function breaks down.
And what happens then?
The breakdown of the hippocampus's time-stamping capability is the biological root of what we call emotional flashbacks.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
When a survivor encounters a trigger, a specific scent, a tone of voice, a phrase that the abuser used, the amygdala sounds the threat alarm. Because the hippocampus failed to file the original trauma as a past event, the brain retrieves the memory without the context of time.
So you feel like it's happening right now.
Exactly. The nervous system reacts as if the original abuse is occurring in this exact second. The fear, the helplessness, the physical paralysis. It is not a memory being recalled. It is a visceral, physiological event being relived in the present moment.
And to make matters worse, while the amygdala is screaming and the hippocampus is dropping the files all over the floor, the prefrontal cortex goes completely offline.
Shuts down entirely.
Right. And the prefrontal cortex is the evolutionary newest part of the brain. It handles logic, rational thought, language, and emotional regulation. But it is slow.
Too slow for an emergency.
Exactly. When the amygdala detects a threat, it doesn't have time to wait for the prefrontal cortex to analyze the situation logically. It shuts it down to conserve energy for basic survival, like running or fighting.
Which is why you cannot simply think or logic your way out of a trauma trigger.
Because the part of your brain responsible for logic is literally starved of blood flow and oxygen.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this biological breakdown completely dismantles the immense shame that survivors carry.
Yeah, the shame is huge.
Survivors constantly judge themselves. They ask, why am I overreacting? Why am I acting so weak? Why can't I just calm down and be rational?
But it's not a choice.
It's not. What they label as a character flaw or a failure of willpower is actually their neurobiology executing a flawless survival protocol. The body is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's sacrificing high-level cognitive function to keep you hypervigilant and alive in the face of an active predator.
The tragedy is just that the nervous system hasn't received the memo that the immediate threat has passed.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That brings us to one of the most profound analogies in the source material, the bunker analogy.
Oh, the underground bunker. Yes.
When a survivor finally leaves the relationship or finally begins the deep work of healing, it is compared to stepping out of an underground bunker after years of living in the dark.
You've adapted to the darkness.
Exactly. You have been living in this damp, dark, restricted space for so long that your eyes have adapted to the gloom. When you finally push the hatch open and step out into the sunlight, the light doesn't feel warm and inviting.
It hurts.
It sears your retinas. It hurts. You squint, you feel dangerously exposed, and you immediately want to retreat back into the familiar darkness of the bunker. Peace and safety actually feel terrifying to a traumatized nervous system because they are entirely unfamiliar.
It is a literal biochemical withdrawal.
Wait, withdrawal? Like from a drug?
Yes. The body has spent years regulating itself around massive spikes of cortisol, adrenaline, and dopamine. When you remove the chaos, the body doesn't automatically relax. It experiences a withdrawal from those stress hormones. The silence of a peaceful environment registers as the terrifying calm before a devastating storm. The nervous system is constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop because in the past, a moment of peace was always a setup for the next attack.
So you have to actively retrain it.
It takes profound, intentional work to teach the nervous system that a baseline of calm is not a trap.
If you are listening and you find yourself constantly reading the room, like if you walk into a meeting or a family gathering and your brain involuntarily starts mapping the micro-expressions on everyone's faces.
Analyzing the exact cadence and pitch of their voices.
Right. Trying to calculate and predict their emotional state before anyone even speaks. I want you to understand that this is not a flaw.
Not at all.
You developed a highly sophisticated radar system to keep yourself safe in an environment where the rules constantly change and danger was always imminent. You developed a superpower of hyper-empathy out of sheer necessity.
But carrying a heavy radar dish on your back 24/7 is exhausting.
It is exhausting, and it is time to learn how to put it down.
Which is exactly why we must transition from the biological problem
Right.
to the biological solution.
Okay, yes. The toolkit.
Right. Because knowing that your nervous system is trapped in a hypervigilant loop is validating, but it isn't a cure.
We need actionable steps.
We have to utilize the specific practical toolkit required to bypass the offline logical brain and speak directly to the body. We have to hack the biology to manually signal safety to the amygdala.
And this involves somatic grounding techniques for internal regulation and behavioral boundaries for managing the external environment. Let's open up that toolkit and start with somatic grounding.
Perfect.
Somatics simply refers to the body. Because the trauma is locked in the physical tissues and the automatic responses of the nervous system, cognitive therapy, just talking about the problem, is often insufficient.
You can't just talk your way out of it.
Right, you have to use the body to heal the body. The first tool is the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
A classic, but so effective.
Very effective. When you feel the panic rising, when the emotional flashback hits and the room starts spinning, you force yourself to name out loud 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. What is the actual neurobiological mechanism making this work?
It is a manual override for the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, how?
When you are in a flashback, your hippocampus has dropped the timestamp, and your brain believes the past trauma is happening right now. By forcing your brain to identify specific, immediate sensory data like the texture of the fabric on your chair, the smell of the coffee in the room.
The hum of the air conditioner.
Exactly. You're violently yanking your cognitive focus out of the traumatic memory loop and dropping it firmly into the present reality.
You are forcing the logical prefrontal cortex to process data.
Which demands blood flow.
Okay.
And as the prefrontal cortex comes back online, it assesses the current sensory data and sends a message back to the amygdala. Look at the evidence. There is no predator in this room. We are safe. The alarm system powers down.
That is incredible, just by counting things in the room. And a similar technique is what Kirsten calls feet on the earth.
Yes, grounding.
It is incredibly simple, but grounded in physiology. You literally go outside, take your shoes off, and stand barefoot on the grass, the dirt, or the sand.
Connecting with the physical world.
Right. You focus entirely on the physical sensation of gravity pulling your mass downward and the earth pushing back up to support you. There is mounting research on the physiological benefits of this kind of grounding, but fundamentally it is about shifting the energy out of the chaotic spinning mind and down into the dense physical reality of the body.
And then we look at bilateral movement, which is a core component of trauma recovery protocols like EMDR.
Right, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Exactly. The technique involves rhythmic, alternating stimulation of the left and right sides of the body.
Like walking.
Yes. It can be a brisk walk where you focus on the alternating rhythm of your footsteps. Or simply crossing your arms and gently tapping your left shoulder, then your right shoulder, back and forth.
The butterfly hug, they call it.
Yes. This bilateral stimulation forces the left and right hemispheres of the brain to communicate across the corpus callosum. It engages the brain's natural information processing system.
Helping to unstick the frozen traumatic memory.
Exactly. It moves it from the reactive amygdala and into the hippocampus to be properly time-stamped and stored as a past event. It is manually digesting the trauma.
And we cannot discuss somatic regulation without box breathing.
Essential tool.
The protocol is simple. Inhale deeply for 4 seconds, hold that breath for 4 seconds, exhale slowly for 4 seconds, and hold empty for 4 seconds. The magic here lies entirely in the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve is the superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest system.
The opposite of fight or flight.
Right. When you are panicked, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which signals to the brain that you are running from danger. By intentionally controlling the breath, and specifically by elongating the exhale, you stimulate the vagus nerve.
Like pulling a lever.
It acts as a literal brake pedal on the sympathetic nervous system. It slows the heart rate, lowers blood pressure, and physically halts the release of cortisol and adrenaline. You are using your diaphragm to force your brain chemistry to alter its state.
Okay, so these somatic tools are vital for calming the internal storm. But what happens when the external storm is still raging?
That's the reality for a lot of people.
Yeah, because for many survivors, going completely no contact isn't an immediate option. You might share custody of children, you might work in the same office, or you might be in the complicated process of untangling assets.
You still have to interact.
You still have to interact with the abuser while trying to heal your nervous system. For this, the toolkit relies heavily on the gray rock technique.
Coined by Dr. Ramani Durvesela.
Yes, exactly.
The gray rock technique is a masterclass in behavioral boundary setting through radical disengagement.
How does it work?
To understand its efficacy, you have to remember what the narcissist is seeking. Narcissistic supply.
Yeah.
They feed on your emotional dysregulation.
So they want you to react.
Yes. Your tears, your screaming, your desperate paragraphs of explanation, your frantic attempts to defend your character, all of it serves as proof to the narcissist that they have ultimate power over your emotional state. It fuels their grandiosity.
So gray rock cuts that off.
The gray rock method is designed to completely sever that supply line. The objective is to make yourself as emotionally uninteresting, unresponsive, and dull as a literal gray rock on the side of the road.
So practically speaking, this requires an absolute flattening of your communication style.
You become incredibly boring.
Right. If they text you a paragraph filled with inflammatory accusations, guilt trips, and twisted realities designed to bait you into a defense, you do not engage with the content.
Not at all.
You reply with, okay, noted, yes, no, I will think about that and get back to you. You strip all emotional inflection from your voice. You maintain a neutral facial expression. You offer zero defense, zero explanation, and zero counterattack.
You become an absolute void, giving them nothing to latch onto.
But wait, if gray rock works by starving them of drama, won't they just try harder to provoke you at first? Like, how does a survivor hold their ground when the narcissist escalates?
This is such a critical question. And survivors need to be acutely prepared for the immediate consequence of implementing this boundary. The extinction burst.
The extinction burst.
Right. Because if gray rock works by starving them of their dramatic fuel, they aren't just going to shrug and walk away immediately. When a toddler throws a tantrum for a toy and you ignore them, they don't suddenly become quiet. They scream louder.
Oh, for sure.
When the narcissist realizes the old buttons they used to press to get a reaction are suddenly disconnected, they will mash the control panel harder.
They will escalate.
They will become more insulting, more dramatic, or they will pivot and play the victim with staggering intensity to force you to break character and comfort them.
That sounds exhausting to deal with.
The extinction burst is the crucible of the gray rock method. It requires immense, ironclad internal fortitude. You have to intellectually understand that their escalation is actually proof that the boundary is working.
That's a good way to frame it.
They are starving for supply, and they are panicking. During this phase, you must remember that gray rock is an emotional shield. It is a specific tactical survival mechanism used only when interaction is mandatory.
So don't use it on your healthy friends.
Exactly. It is not a way to live your life permanently. Keep the interactions as brief as possible, stick strictly to the necessary logistics, and above all else, never, under any circumstances, inform the narcissist that you are using the gray rock method.
Oh, why is that?
Announcing the tactic completely neutralizes it. It turns it into a new challenge for them to overcome and a new metric of manipulation.
I'm gray rocking you right now. Yeah, that just gives them something to attack.
Exactly. It defeats the whole purpose.
So you are basically building an invisible fortress around your nervous system. And while you are standing there, presenting this flat, unbothered rock exterior to the abuser, internally your heart might be hammering against your ribs.
Your amygdala might be screaming in terror.
Right. This is where you deploy the name it to tame it technique. Internally or spoken aloud once you are safely alone, you explicitly articulate the emotion. You say, I am feeling absolute terror right now. My chest is tight. I feel enraged.
That linguistic labeling is profound. By assigning a specific word to the overwhelming visceral sensation, you are recruiting the language centers of the prefrontal cortex.
You're using logic again.
Yes. You shift your position from being helplessly consumed by the emotional tidal wave to being the active observer of the emotion. You are validating your own biological reality, which calms the amygdala and prevents the trauma from getting stuck in the nervous system.
And as you deploy these shields and regulate your body, you slowly create a small pocket of safety. Inside that pocket, you have to begin the delicate work of resurrecting your identity.
Which is so hard after it's been eroded.
It is. This is addressed through what Kirsten calls micro-challenges. When you exist in a narcissistic dynamic for years, your autonomous self slowly atrophies. Your preferences, your tastes, your desires, they all get eroded and replaced by whatever keeps the peace or appeases the abuser.
You forget who you even are.
You forget what you actually like, because your entire existence has been curated to serve someone else. The micro-challenges are designed to rebuild the neural pathways of self-determination, starting with stakes that are infinitesimally small.
The example of the toothpaste from the book is brilliant in its simplicity.
It really is.
A survivor stands in the oral care aisle of the grocery store, staring at the options. For years, they may have reflexively purchased the specific brand their abuser demanded, simply because buying a different brand would trigger a multi-day argument about disrespect.
Over toothpaste?
Exactly. So the micro-challenge is to pause, look at the options, and ask, do I actually like this flavor? What do I want?
Such a radical question.
And then, deliberately picking a new brand and a new flavor solely because it appeals to you. It seems utterly trivial to an outsider. But neurologically, that choice is a revolution.
A revolution in the toothpaste aisle. I love it.
It is casting a definitive vote for your own autonomy. It is flexing a muscle of identity that has been in a cast for years.
Those tiny votes, the toothpaste, choosing to take a different route home, listening to a song you like instead of what they approved of, they compound.
They build momentum.
They accumulate until you have built enough mass to tackle the macro view of recovery. Which brings us to the roadmap of life after abuse. Healing from this specific trauma isn't just about feeling a bit better. It is a structural rebuilding of the self. The source material maps this out through 4 distinct stages of healing.
Right. The framework categorizes the journey, beginning with stage 1, survival.
Which is just putting one foot in front of the other.
Yes. This is the immediate aftermath of leaving, or the immediate aftermath of the psychological waking up to the reality of the abuse. In this stage, the survivor is usually highly dissociated, numb, or paralyzed by hypervigilance.
So what's the goal here?
The objective here is radically simple. Basic physiological safety. There is no deep trauma processing happening here. The focus is on establishing a secure environment, getting enough sleep, eating, and managing basic daily functions.
Just survival.
The most important directive in the survival stage is releasing the shame of not being fixed yet. You are triaging a massive psychological wound.
And once the immediate environment is stabilized, the numbness begins to thaw, launching you into stage 2, awareness.
The hardest stage for many.
This is often described as the most painful phase. The fog of cognitive dissonance lifts, and the reality of what was done to you hits with the force of a freight train.
The anger rushes in.
You are flooded with profound anger at the injustice, deep grief for the years lost, and often intense anger at yourself for not seeing it sooner.
It is a chaotic, overwhelming phase, but it is deeply necessary. The emotional flood is actually a sign of the nervous system thawing.
So it's a good thing, even though it hurts.
Yes. It is the body finally feeling safe enough to clear out the massive backlog of suppressed, unprocessed emotions. The task in the awareness stage is to allow the feelings to exist without judgment, to validate the anger as a healthy response to boundary violation, and to utilize the somatic grounding tools to stay anchored while the storm passes through.
Which clears the ground for stage 3, repair. This is the heavy lifting of recovery. This is where you actively challenge the core narratives the abuser installed in your brain.
You start fighting back internally.
Right. You dismantle the belief that you are fundamentally unlovable or broken. You begin to assert rigid boundaries. And this is where practical systemic tools become invaluable. Kirsten developed a specific spreadsheet tool during this phase to externalize the overwhelming task of rebuilding a life.
The spreadsheet is brilliant.
She created columns mapping out what I want, where I am, how to get it, and spaces for tracking micro progress.
The genius of using a tool like a spreadsheet for trauma recovery lies in its neurobiological impact.
Oh, so?
Trauma creates a profound sense of helplessness and chaos. The amygdala thrives on uncertainty. By taking the massive abstract terror of how do I rebuild my entire life and breaking it down into concrete granular data points on a grid, you force the brain out of the emotional center and into the logical prefrontal cortex.
You are organizing the chaos.
Exactly. The spreadsheet doesn't just track goals. It acts as an external scaffolding for a nervous system that is trying to find its footing. The certainty of the data systematically calms the fear response.
And all that hard systemic work leads to stage 4, integration. This is the profound paradigm shift where the trauma ceases to be the defining characteristic of your existence.
It's a huge shift.
You still carry the story, you still possess the scars, but the narrative no longer dictates your daily reality. You have integrated the experience into your broader history. The trauma becomes a chapter in your book, not the entire title.
This raises an important question, though. We must be incredibly clear about the geometry of this trajectory.
What do you mean by geometry?
Healing is absolutely not a linear progression. You do not check off stage 1, move to stage 2, and cleanly graduate to stage 4 forever. Healing is not a ladder. It is a spiral.
A spiral. That concept is so liberating because it removes the crushing disappointment of the relapse.
Exactly.
You might be operating beautifully in the integration phase, feeling strong and autonomous, and suddenly you smell a specific cologne in an elevator, or a new acquaintance uses a phrase that mirrors your abuser.
And instantly you are plunged right back.
Right back into the overwhelming rage and grief of the awareness phase. The immediate reaction is despair. I haven't healed at all. I am right back where I started.
But you are not where you started. That is the illusion of the spiral. You have circled back over the same geographical coordinate of pain, but you are hitting it from a higher elevation.
Because you have the tools now.
Yes. You are meeting that exact same grief. But this time you are equipped with the somatic grounding tools. You are meeting it with an understanding of your nervous system. You are meeting it with the self-compassion that you cultivated in the repair phase.
So the pain is real, but your capacity to process it has exponentially expanded.
Exactly. The return to the pain is not a failure. It is an opportunity for the nervous system to process a deeper layer of the trauma that you weren't strong enough to handle the first time around.
And as you navigate that spiral, you inevitably reach the terrifying precipice of relationships after abuse.
Oh, that is so daunting.
The idea of trusting another human being with your vulnerability feels akin to walking willingly into traffic.
It really does.
The framework emphasizes the absolute necessity of pacing intimacy. You do not meet a new friend or potential partner and immediately trauma dump your entire history to fast-track a connection.
No, you have to practice measured vulnerability.
You offer a small piece of your authentic self, and then you pull back and observe. You watch the data. Do they hold that vulnerability with respect? Do they listen without centering themselves? How do they react when you implement a small boundary, like saying no to a minor request?
You're collecting data.
Exactly. You collect data over time to build a safe people list, creating a tangible, evidence-based roster of individuals whose actions consistently align with their words.
And rebuilding trust also requires a fundamental unlearning of what love and passion actually feel like.
Oh, this is a big one.
Toxic relationships condition the nervous system to equate high-stakes drama with deep intimacy. The massive biochemical spikes of adrenaline during a fight, followed by the dopamine rush of the reconciliation, create a powerful addiction.
It becomes your baseline definition of passion.
Right. So when a survivor subsequently encounters a genuinely healthy, regulated individual, the relationship lacks those massive biochemical swings.
It feels flat.
Exactly. The calm, steady, reliable nature of a healthy connection might initially trigger anxiety or simply feel incredibly boring.
Because there's no chaos.
The survivor has to consciously re-educate their nervous system to understand that boring is actually a synonym for safe. You have to teach your body to stop interpreting peace as a lack of chemistry.
And that profound internal shift naturally leads to the deepest layer of the work explored in the book, which is spiritual healing.
The big picture.
Right. And this isn't necessarily about organized religion. It is about the fundamental architecture of meaning in your life.
Huh.
It involves a monumental shift in the primary question the survivor asks themselves. For years, the brain loops on the question, why did this happen to me? Why did they choose to abuse me when I loved them so much?
But the why question is a cognitive trap.
How so?
It loops infinitely because there is rarely a satisfying, rational answer to why a damaged individual chose to exploit your empathy. Searching for the why keeps your energetic focus permanently tethered to the abuser's psyche.
You're still focusing on them.
Exactly. The spiritual pivot occurs when you forcefully shift the question from, why did this happen, to what now?
What now?
What now is a question of profound agency. It acknowledges the devastation, surveys the ruins of the life you thought you were building, and asks, what kind of foundation am I going to construct in this empty space?
I love that.
It is the alchemical process of turning immense, senseless pain into deep, usable wisdom.
So what does this all mean? When we pull all of these threads together, the biological hacking, the behavioral shields, the micro-challenges, and the spiral of integration, one of the most synthesizing insights Kirsten provides is about the nature of the grief itself.
The guilt people carry is just immense.
It is. Many survivors carry a crushing burden of guilt, berating themselves with the thought, I was so stupid to stay that long, why couldn't I let go? She points out that the difficulty in leaving and the intensity of the grief is fundamentally misunderstood. You are not grieving the reality of the relationship you had. You are mourning a fantasy.
That realization alone is the key to unlocking self-forgiveness.
It really changes everything.
You are mourning the ghost of a relationship that only ever existed in the projection of your own hope. The abuser was never fundamentally, structurally capable of providing the safety, the reciprocity, and the authentic love they pantomimed during the love bombing phase.
So you grieve the death of the potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You didn't stay because you were weak or foolish. You stayed because you possess a deep capacity for loyalty, and you were subjected to sophisticated psychological manipulation designed to make you believe that if you just suffered a little bit more, you could unlock the love you were promised.
Which was a lie from the start.
Recognizing that the vault was empty from the beginning, that the lock was fundamentally broken, is what finally sets you free from the guilt.
If you are listening to this and you find yourself anywhere on that spiral of healing, whether you are still hiding in the metaphorical cupboard, just waking up to the reality of the manipulation, or you are years removed and simply managing the occasional echoes of the trauma, I want you to try visualizing something vital. I want you to visualize the active process of returning to yourself. Call back the parts of your personality that you had to systematically silence just to keep the peace.
Call them all back.
Call back the loud, playful part of you. Call back the wild part. Call back the assertive, uncompromising part of you that knows exactly how to say no without offering a single justification.
That part is still there.
It is. That authentic version of you, the one that existed before the conditioning, before they told you who you were required to be, was never destroyed. It just went into hiding to survive. And it is still there, waiting for you to declare the environment safe enough for it to emerge.
That concept is the absolute heartbeat of Kirsten's framework. The ultimate message is that you are not permanently broken. You are in a state of profound becoming. True healing is never about attempting to travel back in time and erase the scars so you can revert to the naive person you were before the trauma occurred. That person is gone. Healing is the courageous act of integrating exactly who you are right now, carrying the weight of the scars, the hard-won wisdom, and the hyper-awareness, and weaving it all into a massive, undeniable, unapologetic wholeness.
It's all yours now.
The trauma was inflicted upon you without your consent, but the architecture of your healing belongs entirely, exclusively to you.
There is so much power in reclaiming that narrative. And if the mechanics, the biology, and the strategies we discussed today resonated with you, if they helped put language to the exhaustion you have been carrying, you absolutely must explore Kirsten's work in its full depth.
Highly recommend it.
She has built an incredible reservoir of coaching resources, detailed materials, and ongoing support. It's all available at her website, which is www.thislifething.co.za. Furthermore, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of securing a physical copy of her book, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, a practical guide.
It's an essential manual.
It is a comprehensive manual packed with extensive applications of the tools we merely scratched the surface of today. You can find the direct Amazon link right here. Get it, annotate it, highlight it, and use it as your step-by-step schematic for dismantling the bunker and stepping back into your own life.
And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering concept to turn over in your mind.
What's that?
We spent significant time detailing how your physical brain, the very neurobiology of your nervous system, spent years violently adapting to survive an atmosphere of chaos. It physically altered its own structure, hypersensitizing the amygdala, altering the hippocampus, just to keep you safe at a psychological war zone.
It did so much work.
I want you to sit with the magnitude of that biological power. If your body and your mind are powerful enough, resilient enough to adapt to that level of sustained, complex trauma and keep you alive, imagine the magnificent reality it is capable of building when you finally grant it permission to adapt to peace. What is the first infinitesimally small choice you will make today? Maybe standing barefoot on the grass, maybe taking one deliberate 4-second breath, or maybe simply choosing a new flavor of toothpaste that belongs entirely, unashamedly to you.
The choice is yours, out of the bunker and into the light. Keep moving, keep healing, keep becoming.